Back in '97, one of my best friends and I were heading to the Orient, Ohio, for a bonfire. We arrived really early to help prep the food, get the log benches set, place the wood, get all the drinks ready. It was pretty cool, actually. It kind of reminded me of a summer camp, only with alcohol and bikinis. And I was gearing up to be pretty awesome. And it was. They had a course running behind their property for ATVs. The targets were set up for the compound bow. The pool was heated. My crush was flirting hard with me, and we made it official that night. I met a bunch of new people, and many are still my friends to this day. I met someone else that night who was straight up weird, but I liked this guy. For privacy's sake, I'll leave his name out of it, but I'll refer to him as David. David had hair straight out of the 70s, that thick mane of hair, that might actually be a helmet. He always wore these super bright neon shorts of all different shades and a tank top. My buddy's dad said David made his living as a magician. He must be pretty good, because that seems like a really hard thing to do. He was actually a comedic magician. His shows were supposed to be hilarious, and in the following years, I caught almost every show, and I gotta say, I could have split my pants at some of those zingers. This night, however, will be the first time I see an impromptu performance. His wife did pressure him to do some magic tricks, kind of, alleviate the pressure of the crowd. I was really impressed. He did some things I couldn't explain. We've all heard the light as a feather, stiff as a board thing. That's supposed to be more of a paranormal type thing, but he totally did it by himself to my best friend while placing 2 fingers on his ankle. I have no clue how he did it, but that wasn't even the coolest thing he did that night. He did a few more simple tricks, and he said he needed to go home and grab that bottle of wine he meant to bring. It was just kind of a gift from my buddy's dad, for hosting the party. But no one wanted him to leave. They started chanting his name. It was just a raucous time. It was hilarious. So his wife says, "Do you know exactly where it is?" He said, "Yeah, of course." So with a sigh, she said, "Just grab it." Now, he looked kind of nervous at that, because it seemed like he was trying to understand if she meant what he thought she meant, or if she just meant just run home and get it. He almost seemed to be seeking additional permission from the audience, too. It was kind of weird, but after a few seconds, he smiled, nodded, and reached his arm out to his side. The space in front of his hand generated a black mass. And as his hand neared it, the mass enlarged. So before you know it, his entire arm disappeared into nothingness. Kind of like that, that scene from Roger Rabbit, when the guy's sticking his arm through that, little black circle. So a couple seconds later, he's pulling a bottle of wine through this hole. It was crazy. Most everyone there believed he just did some really cool magic and left it at that. I did not leave it alone. I just didn't understand how he could do something like that. I've seen street magicians before. They do some pretty cool stuff. But this seemed more, I don't know, just not street magic and not fake magic. I wanted to know more, so I asked questions. I wanted to know what he did, how he did it, and most importantly, if I could learn how to do it. After some time, he took me under his wing and taught me all his secrets. I thought I'd be disappointed when I learned his methods, but this was real. He didn't have cards up his sleeve. He didn't leave little animals in secret compartments. He is a genuine sorcerer. David revealed a long lineage of secrets with the understanding I would never divulge this ancient methodology. I won't reveal them either. This man will always be my friend, and when he needs me, he knows I'll be there for him. As I stand here now, 3 years from that night, I still think that was the coolest bit of magic I've ever seen. Especially now, as we stand in the middle of a bank safe, about 300 miles away from home, cleaning out the most beautifully crisp stacks of cash I've ever seen. Who would have thought magic could ever be so exhilarating? My oldest child, my daughter, told me she doesn't like it when I watch her from outside her bedroom window. I asked her what she's talking about. She said, "Daddy, every night you watch me. I don't know how you can see me, but I can see your eyes, and you're staring at me. And your hands move around the edges of the window real slow, like you're trying to feel for a way in." I thought perhaps she was having a horrible nightmare every night, and for some awful reason, I was the bad guy in her dream. To be fair, she is an 11-year-old with a vivid imagination. She comes up with a lot of ideas. Most are not original, but a lot are. And sometimes she comes up with some pretty creepy stuff. So I thought she was doing this to herself. I bought a video security system. Not top of the line, but it was easy to set up and easy to use. Just what I was looking for. The weird thing is, watching the real-time footage, it's oddly soothing, not to mention addictive. Watching my wife and kids move about the house and doing whatever it is they're doing makes me feel like I'm some kind of guardian. I feel like I could do this forever. It's like watching a reality show, only, actual reality. Very surreal. Anyway, after we ate dinner, we put the kids to bed. I kissed my son goodnight, and he went out like a light. Easiest kid ever. My wife was still in our daughter's bedroom looking over her school agenda, asking questions about math homework, and my daughter gave more than appropriate answers for each. I cut in at the first opportunity, told my wife I was going to sit in here for a while until she falls asleep. She's having issues with that, and I want to do what I can to put her mind at ease. I knew my wife wanted to go for a run early in the morning, so I was planning on the couch for the rest of the night. She insisted I didn't have to, but I wanted to, and I knew she'd appreciate it. After my wife left our daughter's bedroom, I turned the light out and settled in, sitting with my back against the wall. I was immediately tired. I was in an accident a few months back, and I can zonk out pretty quickly. I tried to fight it, but I started to doze off and fought the urge to lie down. I did it anyway. I thought I could close my eyes for just a few minutes. That also did not pan out. When I awoke, I was unsure how long I was out, but I saw this guy peering in through my daughter's window. He was staring toward my daughter's bed. And yes, his hands were slowly feeling around the edges of the window, occasionally giving a gentle push. I moved slowly outside her bedroom doorway and woke my wife. I told her to call the police and keep an eye on the window. She freaked out, of course, and it took a few minutes to calm her down. She finally did as I asked, and I made my way to the back door. Sneaking around my house, there he was, on the ladder, and his hands were doing the same thing out here as I saw him do inside. He was trying to force that window open, as if hoping the window were left unlocked and could be opened with just the right amount of light pressure. I moved slowly and quietly toward the base of the ladder. When I reached it, I put all my weight behind and heaved. The ladder exploded out from under this creeper, and he plummeted to the ground. There was this glorious thud when he made contact with the ground, and I swear I heard a snap. He moaned, complaining he broke something. I don't know what it was, but I placed a few chosen kicks to his head. I could hear sirens now. Distant, but getting closer. I had to work fast if we were to be rid of this guy forever. When the cops arrived, they were greeted with a man who was beaten to death or near death. It was unclear. I was sitting on the porch steps, breathing heavy. I'd lost a lot of weight in the last couple months. The cops approached both of us separately with absurd caution. I do not appreciate having a gun pointed at me, especially when I have no weapon of my own and am clearly out of energy. My wife came running outside. I could see my kids in the doorway. They looked scared, but my daughter, she looked relieved. Looking over at this guy, it's crazy how much we look alike. If I didn't know any better, I'd think he was my twin, separated at birth. I don't understand how he found me. I have no social media. I'm not a public figure. I have no important job. So why? At first I thought it was to abduct my kids, but the more I think about it, he's clearly here to take over my life. Was it simply to live a life he never had? I don't know. And I may never know. But I would put my life back on track. After the cops questioned me, and the ambulance took the other away, I gave my daughter a big hug with tears stinging my eyes. Lindsay, my daughter, whispered in my ear, "Are you okay? That was a really big fall." I nodded, smiling to cover the pain I felt in my ribs. Being away from my family was tough, and I was able to hold at least one of them for the first time in months. Lindsay is a very clever little girl. If she hadn't figured out the imposter was just that, we never would have been able to pull it off. 2 down, 2 to go. I remember once, as a child, back in 1984, there was an elderly man sitting on the corner curb right outside our house. I wasn't in school yet, and my grandma was watching me. The two of us went outside, and my grandma asked if he needed any help. From my point of view, he wasn't speaking coherently. My grandma was scared for him, so she took him inside and called the police for help. I remember she was upset because no one answered. So she called my grandpa for help. No answer. Then she called my aunt, and she did answer. My aunt arrived, and the elderly man was now lying on the concrete. I remember feeling really uncomfortable because I could see he had a bloody wound on his forehead. My aunt and grandma both walked over to him and helped him sit upright. They offered him some water, and he did drink a little. They continued talking to him for a while. Now I know it was to keep him awake. Then another man startled us, all of us, except the elderly man. This mystery man was wearing a red jacket, flannel shirt, blue jeans, and brown work boots. He looked young, full beard, and had curly light brown hair. I cannot remember much of the conversation, but the last thing I do remember is my grandma said, "Do you think you can get him home?" And the man replied, "Oh yes, ma'am. I know this gentleman. I'll see him safely home. Mary will be happy to see he's okay." When the man helped him up, A set of keys fell out of his pocket. I ran over, picked them up, and handed them to the elderly man. He didn't reach out for them. Looking back, I think he was confused by what was happening. The mystery man said, "Don, you want me to hold on to your keys for you?" He grabbed them from me and said, "Thank you, little man." He helped Don into his car, then went to the driver's side. He started the engine, and it roared to life. It was loud. I have no idea how none of us heard the car approach in the first place. A couple days later, my grandma was talking to my aunt and my grandpa about an obituary she read, and she, along with my aunt, both confirmed this was the man out on the curb. He was preceded in death by his wife, Mary. My grandmother was convinced this mystery man was an angel coming to take him home, to heaven. I always thought she was crazy. Over the years, she would talk about that time with my aunt and myself. Well, I'm bringing this up now because an elderly neighbor lady down the street fell in front of my house about an hour ago. My wife yelled for help, so I came running out. I picked the lady up and set her on a chair on my porch. My wife brought her a glass of water. She was very disoriented and speaking incoherently. Out of nowhere, this man says, "May I be of assistance?" I turned to look at who had spoken, and there was a young man wearing a red jacket, a flannel shirt. He had a full beard and curly light brown hair. After a moment of staring at this man, I said, "I've seen you before." The man grunted a laugh and approached closer. He patted my shoulder with his left hand and said, "Hazel, hon, are you ready to go home?" She looked at the man, almost seemed to recognize him. Then she nodded, smiled. She looked 10 years younger. He walked over to her and helped her to her feet. They walked to the car and I followed. A little, I stopped. I felt like I was intruding. He gently guided her onto the passenger seat and walked around to the driver's side. Before he got in, I said, "Stop." And he did stop. He stood there with the door open and looked at me with his crooked smile. I approached him. I don't know why, but my eyes were filling with tears. "Do you remember me?" I asked. He barked another laugh and said, "Of course I remember you. You handed Don's keys to me when you were just a little thing. And your grandmother was very sweet in her concern." Then I asked him if he was an angel. He asked me if angels drove retro muscle cars. I shrugged and said, "Maybe." He laughed again. I wanted to laugh, but the situation was too deep. He said, "I have to get her home now, buddy. You take care of yourself." I nodded, not able to speak any further. He then said, "I'll see you in another 47 years. Make the trip to visit your grandmother. It'll do you both some good. And take your family with you. She needs to see those kids every now and then." That was the last thing he said to me. I think we'll go down and visit my grandma this weekend. I'm going to give her a call.